Here follows an extract from my book Artful Designs, available from Amazon. Chapter 10, Part 1. Benedict had decided to go home and catch up with the wife and daughters he'd inadvertently continued to miss throughout the day at the Croquet Crown. He suspected that they'd purposefully avoided his squeaking. However, Primrose couldn't bear that all of her uncle should abandon her at such short notice, and so Matt had been persuaded to attempt to counter his jet lag on Emma's sofa later that night. Jonty had opted for a real bed in his old room, and everyone had agreed to meet back at Beth's for lunch the next day. There was a surfeit of sandwich and cake left from the WI refreshment tent, and Beth was sure that they wouldn't go to waste if she brought a supply back home. However, after a day of dainty nibbles on the Saturday, Beth felt sure that everyone would appreciate something a bit more heartening. Although it made for a strange Sunday lunch, Beth took the WI resolution to reduce food waste seriously and was determined to make use of the surplus stock whilst there was plenty of willing mouths to feed. As a supplement, she bubbled up a large pan of leek and potato soup bolstered with courgettes and sweet potatoes, and then made a couple of quick treacle puddings in the microwave to fill any unsatisfied corners. The jumbled menu suited the family party atmosphere, and people happily dunked ham sandwiches into the soup as they chatted. Whether there was space or not, everybody managed at least one helping of treacle sponge and custard. "I'm disappointed that Rick didn't show up," said Drew. "I was hoping he could have stayed over and spent some time with us. I'd like to get to know him better. He's a very clever man, although he doesn't blow his own trumpet." "Unlike me," said Jonty. "In oh so many ways," said Matt, fulfilling the obligatory brother banter quota. "I've heard that not only is he the head curator of the museum, but he is also director of a board that has oversight over several prestigious museums throughout Holland. He has a wealth of knowledge which crosses over many cultures, and he gives lectures all over the world. I do wonder if all this learning restricts his heart and soul a little when it comes to art," said Drew. "Brace yourselves, here comes the Constable debate again," said Emma. "I'm just saying that knowledge isn't everything," said Drew, realising that his audience wasn't in a sober enough mood for a serious art discussion. He changed his tack to suit the homely atmosphere. "He is learning to appreciate our cuisine, though, and he's missed out on your mum's legendary soup." "In that case, I'm glad he's not here now, otherwise it'd mean less for us," said Jonty, who had eaten considerably more than his fair share already. The shrill tones of the telephone ringing made Beth jump to her feet, but Drew stopped her with a gesture as she was penned in by diners who had pushed back their chairs to stretch their legs. As Drew had a clear path, he went to take the call. Conversation dwindled as people strained to understand the increasingly ambiguous one-sided conversation. Drew returned to the table and all eyes were expectantly raised in inquiry, waiting for curiosity to be satisfied. "That was Benji. He reckons he's not destined to sit down to a family Sunday lunch more than once a month. They found Finn." "He's not dead, but he's only just alive," said Drew. "Where was he found?" asked Beth. "I gather he was found behind the Whitworth. It sounds like he's been knocked about a fair bit and then left for dead in one of the museum's trade refuse skips. Benji is taking Forbes to the hospital now to have a look at the lad to see what can be learned from his various bumps and bruises until he can speak for himself, presuming that he'll ever be able to." "I'm not sure that's a certainty from the way Benji spoke," said Drew. "I thought I'd heard you say that Forbes was a forensic pathologist," said Nathaniel. "Isn't he supposed to wait until they're dead? Hopefully his services won't be required at all if the poor chap pulls through." "You're quite right. Forbes is a pathologist, but he's a unique specimen. He's an unlikely mixture of geeky nerd and dashing wannabe detective. In safe company, he's quite willing to read between the lines and make a prognosis off the record," said Beth. "I knew Benji was sure that Finn would turn up eventually, but I don't think he expected it in such a manner as this. He's going to the hospital now, but he says he'll drop by later tonight to let us know how he gets on. Maddox is meeting him at the hospital, and he says he'll come back with him unless something else crops up later." Emma brought matters back to a more palatable subject by explaining that Primrose needed to go home for a bath and early bedtime, as tomorrow was a school day, term not quite being over. So as to squeeze in as much uncle therapy as possible, Matt and Jonty were to go back to Lilac Cottage and partake of milk and biscuits once Primrose was washed and in her pyjamas. The question of who was to have the honour of reading her a bedtime story was yet to be decided. How she would choose between her dad, who was a usual favourite, and either of her uncles would have to be seriously considered while Emma was washing her hair. After clearing away the dishes into the dishwasher, the evening was left free to Beth and Drew. Once the statutory cups of tea were shared, Beth decided to go and play piano, while Drew and Noodle, the aged Bichon, settled to snooze together on the sofa. Noodle was very old and spent most of his time asleep, regardless of external events, but he cherished the opportunity of a slumber buddy and snored away with a deeper contentment, curled into Drew's chest, their noses almost touching as they both slept. For the full book of Artful Designs, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.